Hi everyone, this is Matt Kiernan from Pharmica. Thanks for joining us for our SharePoint webinar series. It's about 11 o'clock here Eastern Time. We're just going to wait a couple more minutes. I'm sure some people are finishing up some work or meetings. We'll probably get started about 3 minutes after, about 5 minutes after. In the meantime, you might see a survey with 2 questions that are popping up around which version of SharePoint and a question about migration. If you want to answer them, we'll report out the results at the end of this conference. As you see, the poll should be opening up now. So we're just going to wait a couple more minutes, and then we'll get started with our webinar. Hi everybody, some of you just want to join. We're going to get started in a couple minutes here, just waiting for some other people to join. And we'll get started probably in about 2 minutes. You may have seen 2 survey questions that are going to pop up. If you want to go ahead and answer them now, and then we'll report the results at the end of the workshop here. Okay, well, why don't we go ahead and get started. My name is Matt Kiernan. I'm a partner with Pharmica. I want to say thank you for joining us for our webinar series on SharePoint. Typically, the way we run our webinars on SharePoint, we go out and we meet with clients, we hear things they're struggling with, or people request a webinar if they want to get some information about something they might be struggling with. Recently, one of our clients asked us to put together this webinar for how you can maximize the value of your organizational content. So at the end of this workshop, if there are things that you want for a webinar topic, if you want to email us directly, or you can type it in as well to our webinar organizer as well, you can do that. So today we're going to be talking about getting the most value from your content. And as we get into, first I want to do an introduction of our team here. There we go, I was having a little trouble with my screen there. So on the phone call from the Pharmica team is Elliot Porter, who's a SharePoint architect, 20 years experience, doing a variety of things, knowledge management, user experience. He's done a good bit of work in the pharmaceutical industry as well as in other industries in SharePoint, so it can bring a variety of perspectives. We have Nick Lagrada, SharePoint architect, Microsoft certified, been in life sciences his whole career. Billy D, who's our webinar guru. He's got about 8 years of SharePoint experience in interactive graphics, web design. And then myself there on the right, Matt Kiernan. I started Pharmica Consulting about 10 years ago. I spent the whole career in the pharmaceutical industry. So that's a little bit about our team. In terms of SharePoint and Pharmica, what we do, First of all, we're a consulting services company, so we do more things than SharePoint. But in terms of SharePoint itself, many times we're playing sort of that liaison between the business and IT. All of our consultants know about the pharmaceutical industry, so a lot of the value we add is knowing what users need and knowing how to build things in SharePoint. We don't necessarily work with clients and say, tell us about your architecture and what you need. You know, we're much more interactive in our discussions and recommendations, so it makes it a lot easier to pull things out of people in terms of what they're struggling with. Because in the end, SharePoint's just a tool to help solve a problem. So we're really good at understanding those problems up front and knowing how to architect SharePoint. So we'll do those kind of things that could be more from a configuration perspective, requirements, project management. We'll also do custom solutions in SharePoint where we deliver end-to-end solutions from requirements gathering to the technical work to training, et cetera. So the form architecture, installation, we'll do things in the cloud, digital signature, branding, et cetera. You know, we have a tremendous amount of experience around business process, clinical, marketing, sales, all the functions, the corporate functions of HR, finance, et cetera, program management. And you know, we have an extensive SharePoint training program in-house as well to make sure people are staying up to date on what is going on with SharePoint from a tool perspective. But then the other thing we've done, we've had over 14 SharePoint conferences over the last 7 years. These are 2-day conferences often, and we've probably seen what every pharma company, just about, particularly say top 50 pharma, what they're working on, what they're doing, whether they're presenting, they're attending a conference, or through our consulting work itself. So we have a pretty broad and extensive knowledge about SharePoint in the pharmaceutical industry. The one thing I have at the very last bullet there, which I think is a really important one, the one thing we're really good at is we excel at the adoption piece. So it's one thing to build a SharePoint site. It's another thing to build a SharePoint site and people use it. That's always the hardest part, not the technical part. Getting people to use SharePoint, that is the hardest part. So we definitely excel at that part of it. So on the last slide, I talked about our consulting services. This one, I just wanted to show you a couple things. We not only do webinars, we do workshops and conferences. We have a SharePoint conference coming up October 1st. That one's in San Francisco. We have a clinical data visualization workshop October 1st in San Francisco as well. We just had a data visualization conference last week in Cambridge, Massachusetts. We also, I don't have this one up here, but we have a program management forum coming up late September in the Pennsylvania, New Jersey area as well. All that's on our website, pharmacaconsulting.com. So Google and 90%. I actually presented this slide at the conference last night for data visualization, and I was asking the attendees if anyone knew this number of 90% and why it's associated with Google. And no one knew it, but it's coming up more and more often. 90% is Google saying that 90% of the world's data was created in the last 2 years alone. And it's only going to increase in terms of the amount of content that's created in a shorter duration. In 2 more years, it could be 99% of the content's created in the last 2 months. So this is only going to continue to get more and more rapidly grow, and it very much relates to SharePoint. And the part here is around SharePoint sites. So often, what happens with our clients, they have something that looks like this picture here, which is a messy library, right? And they come to us and they say, this is what our SharePoint sites look like. We have unstructured SharePoint sites, there's no governance, and as a result, it's very difficult to find documents. It's difficult for people to navigate and find things. So they typically call us and they say, can you help us? And there's often 3 scenarios. One is companies are new to SharePoint. So this messy library might be their e-rooms or just their file share. And most companies at this point, they've already went on the SharePoint, so that doesn't happen too often at this point. The second scenario is when people are migrating from SharePoint to a newer version of SharePoint, and the discussion becomes, do we clean up all of our documents first before we migrate over? Or do we just do a lift and shift where it's one messy house and you migrate and you create another messy house? It's quicker, but it's still messy, right? The third scenario when people help us with the SharePoint sites in terms of maximizing value of the content is we just got to clean things up. We've got thousands of sites. We don't know where they are. People can't find stuff. Users are frustrated. So that can often be an example as well. So the work we do with pharmaceutical companies, we like to turn a messy library into something that's very structured, something where it's easier to find documents. People can find information that they didn't know was there that's very useful. And so a large part of what we do is really helping organizations maximize the value of their content. So essentially, we provide the structure, we help with the change management, search, things like that, because at the end of the day, your content's very valuable. So what I'm going to go into for the rest of the presentation here, there's 4 parts, getting the most out of your content, and the first one is classification and hierarchy. I'm going to give a couple examples there. Then I'm going to go into labeling and tagging. Then I'm going to go into navigation and wayfinding, which I'll probably mention several times this webinar. Wayfinding is probably one of my favorite words of all time. And then search. So a little bit more on classification and hierarchy. So often what we do, particularly when we work with pharmaceutical companies from an enterprise perspective or say even an R&D perspective, we often divide the sites into 2 parts. One is around the organization itself. So you can see your R&D, marketing, sales. Within R&D, you have, say, clinical operations, program management, safety. And so we structure the sites and the use of the sites around those functions. So we might say clinical operations, we meet with our groups and we say, you know, what are your needs? And we can design whether it be something just like a landing page for ClinOps sites. And many times when we're doing this, it's more around configuration and doing things for people. It's not just a push of information, but sharing as well. So, but many times companies just want to stick to more configuration than writing a lot of code, so we'll do that very often. But what essentially we do is we create the classification hierarchy so that people can actually find things. And this gets all the way down to templates and libraries and metadata, et cetera. So this is around the division focus, the organization. The second part around the classification hierarchy is around the portfolio. At the end of the day, what we do. We have a portfolio. We manage you know, the different drugs or assets as well as, you know, the clinical trials. And what we're often asked to do is build a site that is dedicated for the development pipeline. This could be from all the way through discovery through late stage. But this essentially creates your classification and hierarchy, which is your building block for people to maximize the value of the content. And we're going to talk a little bit more about those 2 pieces in a minute. So labeling and tagging. So a couple examples here. There are really 2 main examples. One is your enterprise content types. And this is where your metadata is a little more tightly controlled. It's centrally located. And often when we work with companies, well, there's 2 things we look for with the metadata. One is really you don't want to have much more, say, than 5 metadata points. You can keep it more to 3. And then also these things need to be stable over time. So some of the metadata you're putting in there, if they're going to be constantly changing, we often recommend that you find something else for tagging documents or ask how important it is, because there's nothing worse when you're uploading a document and the tags in there just don't make sense anymore because things have changed. That's the hard part with how fluid our organizations are these days. And then the second piece is around the content types and site columns we're showing at the bottom here, which becomes a very important piece for tagging as well. So why are taxonomies and metadata so important? Well, the meta tags, you know, they can be done automatically, or they can have users manually add them upon creating the document. And what is the big benefit from doing that then becomes the views that you can create from the tags. It creates different views for the user in which they can easily find things, they can store things, and when you have so much content in your SharePoint sites, this becomes a very handy way for allowing people to see what is there just by looking. So through all the conferences I've mentioned before, we've had the 14 SharePoint conferences. The number one question people always ask is, what is better, folders or metadata? And many times end users struggle with that because they're so used to the folder piece. But if you look at Apple iTunes, they never went to folders. They went right to metadata. And many times you put it in a context where then, because all they're showing is a view in your iTunes, but if you put it in a context and they show people the value of views as a result of metadata, that's when I think you can slowly convince people that metadata and views can be more important than folders. But some people they're very much used to seeing things their way in folders, and it becomes difficult to change. But this is one way to help. So the other part, for getting to maximize the most out of your content, is navigation and wayfinding. Wayfinding, what is that silly looking word? Well, it's knowing where you are, say in your SharePoint site, and where you want to get to, and how do you actually get to it. I mean, if you just think of the word wayfinding and turn it around, it's you finding your way. And that becomes, for many users, that's how they think. So if you're looking at, for example, you're on a marketing site and we have the division organized and classified. We're on the marketing site. You want to get to medical affairs. You can click on the marketing and get to medical affairs. And another way in which you can find your content much easier through wayfinding is having what's called a site map in the bottom right here, which shows all the different sites and folders where things are located, so that people can actually look at this and say, okay, I would actually navigate to one of these documents or folders or sites, and the site map becomes very helpful.
Hey, Matt. Hey, Matt. Sorry to interrupt.
The other part about
Matt, I apologize. This is Billy D from Pharmica. We had a quick question come in on that last slide.
Okay.
I'm not sure if you can go back. Somebody asked, sitemaps, are those static representations or real-time content maps?
Oh, hi.
Nick, do you want to answer that one?
Yeah, hi. This is Nick Legrand. I'm a SharePoint architect with Pharmica. And the short answer is both. They're static, and they could be directly pulled from some data source. If you think back 8 years ago when SharePoint 2007 came out, when I first started doing these interactive sitemaps, they were static, and somebody would have to manually update them if some content area of the structure changed. So it was manual. But as jQuery and JavaScript became more accepted and more used in SharePoint, especially with SharePoint 2013, we've automated it. So these maps are basically like an XML structure that is styled. It has a style applied to it. So it pulls all of its information from a tracker, a list that people submit their site requests to. It's put into a sort of like an organizational chart within the list, so people select its hierarchy. And then that list generates this map. And it's quite a powerful tool, especially to manage it, because there are no manual updates to this. It's automatically created based off of the data that's behind it.
Great, thanks for the answer, Nick. And I should have mentioned in the beginning, if you have questions while I'm presenting, just go ahead and fire away the questions. Okay, so let's see, we're navigation and wayfinding. And my computer's frozen here. There we go. So the next slide on navigation and wayfinding is using the age to surface content. So let's say, for example, you're at the R&D site, you click on that, you go in the upper left. In the bottom left, you go to the pipeline page. And let's say if you want to navigate to an asset in late stage for oncology and an asset for late stage in cardiovascular. So you click on those links in the right column under late stage development, and ultimately you land on a molecule site or an asset site. So the one in blue, we're showing the molecule number 1, the one sort of the tan beige color there, molecule 2. As you notice that they are the same structure. So the thing that becomes very important as you do the wayfinding piece is not only that people can find their way, but when they arrive, when you're doing things of common uses such as an asset site, that there are standards in place for all these sites so that people know if they're in molecule 1 and say they're in regulatory, they know where to find things there. If they go to molecule 2, it's the same structure and they know where to find things there as well. So often requests come in for the standardization of these sites, and we work with the development teams, or whether it be an organization will work with teams on how things should be structured so that there are standards in place. The last piece around the maximize the value of contents around search, always the fun one that a lot of people struggle with over the years. So the first thing is we highly recommend that you assign a search administrator that can do a variety of things that are mentioned below. Keywords, synonyms, best bet, they all become very important. So the keywords, what you're presenting to the user. The synonyms become very important, and then there are a variety of analytics reports that you can use to refine the keywords and synonyms, the best bets, as well as seeing what else should be added. That becomes a very important part. The search scopes become very important. If you want to, search an entire site, if you want to search a site collection, how big of a search is going to be happening. And then iFilters basically crawls the content within documents, so being able to use that as well. And then a ranking model so that you can give priorities to different things, and you can apply it to an entire farm, a site. But we find these are typically a couple of the more important things to improve search with pharmaceutical companies in SharePoint. So a couple things here. If you have a later version of SharePoint, we're showing how search can be used here with, say, if you type in the word contract, and then in the upper middle part of this screenshot, and then the left-hand side showing result types. You have a variety of things there for Excel, PowerPoint, the author, the modified date, all those things where you can refine your search results. And let's say if I go to the middle column and I'm looking for a document for, say, consultants, it's highlighted in blue, and then the right-hand side showing the hover over, that pops up. And ultimately, I'm looking for a Dave & Buster's contract, and I could see it open up right there, and I say, okay, there it is right there. So I have all the information in front of me where I can narrow things, I can get things presented that is more relevant to my needs, and then ultimately take some action, whether I want to open it up, I want to send it to somebody, whatever. So search can be very powerful in terms of just not only finding it, but then just quickly taking some action, which was the original intent. So from
hey, Matt,
experience you mentioned
apologies,
before,
Matt, we got a question. Sorry, Matt, we got another question. Yeah, let me just go ahead. We got a question that a user, an attendee, is moving to SharePoint 2013, but they want to understand what restrictions there are for SharePoint on Office 365. It's better for their cost structure to use Office 365, but they want to know if there's any downsides.
If there's any downsides to Office 365. Nick or Elliot, you have thoughts on that one? You want to repeat the question one more time, Billy?
Are there any downsides? Oh, go ahead, Elliot.
Oh no, it was just me. I was repeating the question. So yeah, it's Billy. You need the question again, Nick, or are you all right? I'm gonna let you go.
Elliot.
Yeah, no, yeah. Ask it again. It's pretty lengthy, so ask it again, please.
This is Elliot. 365 offers a lot of advantages, cost-wise, management-wise, but for security reasons, a lot of companies opt to choose for on-prem. But other than that, you can do almost everything in 365, with the exception of certain configurations, and that seems to be one of the limiting factors is what you can install on 365. Microsoft pretty much locked that down to make it a little bit more of a controlled environment. And so when you need to configure certain things, you would have to do them on a front-end sort of configuration and make it something that is not an installed solution. So certain third-party web parts would not be available in 365.
Right, that's a good example. This is Nick again. Yeah, and more on that. So if you think that at any time in the future you're going to want to integrate with on-premise systems, Office 365 might not be the best solution because it's difficult. So if you had like a data warehouse that had on-premise data and you wanted to integrate it into Office 365, it's going to be difficult. You'll have to probably go through Azure and use a connector, but it complicates it. It's a complicated system, whereas if it was on-prem and you were trying to connect with the data warehouse, it's a much easier project. It's much more streamlined. It's just one example. It's one thing that keeps people from fully moving to Office 365. What I see a lot of is the hybrid environments where they may use SharePoint on-premise for custom applications, have that hybrid setup where maybe standard sites are in Office 365 and their identification service is on-prem, so their Active Directory is on-prem. It's set up in a hybrid setup, so when people authenticate either on-prem or in Office 365, they're always directed back to the on-premise domain controller to authenticate. It's probably one of the more common setups I see now. It's easier to manage because people don't have two IDs. It's one ID that's replicated to Office 365. Pretty effective. Yep.
A lot of the clients are basically, like Nick was saying, doing a hybrid approach where they start with email. I mean, ultimately everything's going to move to the cloud. It's a matter of, understanding as you go along. So they often will take sites that are maybe not as important to them or highly used and move some things to the cloud, figure out what they like about it. Because a lot of it comes down to, frankly, the culture of a company. Some companies in pharma don't want to go to the cloud at all, and they're very against it. So, many times what companies have done lately is start with email, and then from there they move some SharePoint sites to the cloud, and they just kept over time moving more and more sites there as they learned more and more. But oftentimes that's a company-specific question in terms of culture or what you're trying to do with SharePoint. So if you have additional questions there on some examples, we can follow up with you later on those. Okay. So one last thing I just want to mention here, we're pretty much done with the slides, is, if you put all these things into place around the classification hierarchy, the meta tagging, all that stuff, searches, what becomes really important is you sort of clean up your house, your library. You got to have a mechanism in place where it stays clean. So this part is really critical. So on the left-hand side, we're showing a group of people. They have a new project, new SharePoint site that they want, or just call it some new project, process improvement. They're implementing some system, whatever. But they want a SharePoint site to help the team. Everybody at this point should have a demand management process that's designed in a way that things can be done quickly but are the most useful. So in other words, collecting information around how a site fits in, a new project comes up, how it fits in with the hierarchy, how it fits in with the standards, whether it's going to be in the cloud or not. Having all these things done is critical, or else everything's going to be a mess again. So the demand management process really is a key piece for maximizing the value of your content. Often companies will have a central group here, whether it be central R&D or central enterprise. And typically not too many employees in those groups, but that's their main job, is the demand management process and servicing people, making sure they basically can maximize the value of their content. That's what it's all about at the end of the day. So I want to say thank you for joining the webinar here. We'll have a couple questions. My name is Matt Kiernan. If you have any questions for me, you can reach out to me. We'll open up, see if Billy, if we have more questions there. Actually, you want to do the survey, Billy? Billy may be on mute. Billy?
Hello, can you hear me, Matt?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry about that. Yes, well, the polls are closed. We did them early on, but I can tell you that the results, I believe I can share. Which version of SharePoint are you currently using? We had split right perfectly into quarters, 25% using 2007, 25 using 2010, and 25 using 2013, and 25 not currently using SharePoint. So those were the results of the first poll. And Second poll, I apologize, I'm just going back to, we had 33% of the attendees are using SharePoint 2007. No one attending is currently using 2010 or 2013, and 67% do not have plans for a migration in the future. So I think that a lot of our questions are probably going to be around the earlier versions of SharePoint, and let me go ahead and access them right now. And the first question we have that I see coming in are, okay, so like I said, somebody's considering moving up. What are the main differences with the new version of search in SharePoint 2013?
This is Nick. It's a good question. There's SharePoint search has been revamped in 2010. They had that fast option, which made it really powerful, and in 2013, now fast is integrated. So there's a couple things that really stand out now with SharePoint Search in 2013, and that is the core functionality of it. It's built off of a search index. So you query against an index, whereas in previous versions of SharePoint, you didn't. You queried against SharePoint. It was difficult to build search applications in like SharePoint 2007 or even 2010. So in SharePoint 2013, you can build full-blown search applications that search the index, and it's really fast, and you can pull millions of results in milliseconds. It's really impressive. Refiners, I don't know if you're familiar with these, but if you go to like Best Buy on the left side, you see those refiners that you can drill down into content. So in 2013, it adds those, and you can configure them so it will extract metadata out of documents, whether from the title or from within the document, and you can configure the refiners on the left to show up based off of what you think those refiners should be. So if you wanted to have a refiner to drill down by type, and you had some metadata that had 4 types, the refiner would say type, and under there would be the 4 options. Then as you click the option, it would drill down the search. So it lets people find exactly what it is they're looking for based off of those drillable refiners on the left. What else is different that I use a lot? Result sources, which is now the replacement for search scopes. And what a search scope is, you think of the big giant index of millions of items. The search scope result source is a subsection of that. So you've probably all seen this if you have any version of SharePoint. When you search, you see results from everywhere, and you see 5,000 results that make no sense to what it is your group works with on a content, from content perspective. The result sources, they give you that narrowed down focus of content, but what's important is they let you write your own search query within the result source. So you can tell it exactly what it is you're looking for when you're configuring this as like a developer or admin, exactly what to include in that scope. So you think back in SharePoint 2007, they had the scopes at the top where it's like all people or all sites or this site. That's pretty much it. That's you click this site and it searched this site. But a result source, it allows you to build this query into it where you can write the query to say this site where documents are equal to me. This is a popular one because I seem to do this a lot. So now you have the ability to have like a search page where there's a button that says My Docs, and it will search the whole site for any document that you're an author of. We use that quite a bit. People seem to like it. I'll give one more. The display templates. And a display template is like a JavaScript CSS template that lets you style the way a result looks. So in the old versions of SharePoint, you kind of were stuck with out of the box what the results look like. It's kind of bland, and I particularly didn't like it, so I would always customize it after the fact. But display templates let you change everything about the way a set of results looks. So you think of the normal way, like Google. That's Google's way of doing it. But think of it in a different way. Think of it for if you wanted the search results to be more tabular with columns. What I've done recently is like the search result would be one row with 5 columns, and one of those columns might be a rating, but it was all in one row. And that's the display template lets you do that. I could go on, but they're the main search differences.
It's always a pain point with clients.
Thanks.
If you have more questions about that, I mean, obviously, if you want to email me, I can get you in touch with Nick or Elliot. We can answer more of that. Bill, any more questions?
Yeah, I think we have time for one more. What else can I use SharePoint for besides sharing documents?
Well, that's a loaded question. I mean, SharePoint is, I don't know, if I was to give it percentage-wise, I think it's 30% sharing documents and 70% other things. What comes to mind, what we do a lot of is workflows and business automation type projects. So 30% is document management, but SharePoint also has a very robust workflow system where you can automate a business process almost entirely. So you can route approvals and collect information, digitize forms. You could get rid of all the paper in a process and have it all digitized using digital forms. Workspaces, they're not too big anymore. I think they deprecated them in 2013, but we still create them. So workspace, it's
the meeting
more than
workspace.
just. Say that again. Sorry.
Is that the meeting workspace you're referring to?
Yeah, the meeting workspaces. Yeah, even though they're deprecated, they are still valuable, and all of our clients still like to use them. So we still create them. They're very powerful. It is not just about sharing documents. It's about managing a project with decisions and actions and tasks and all presented in one screen, one interface. They call it the meeting workspace. Very effective. It's changed a little bit over the years, and now they're integrating OneNote into SharePoint 2013. So when you're working in one of these workspaces, you have OneNote online to take notes. Very effective.
Yeah, we often see it's like program management groups and using that as a sort of their tool for managing their projects. So it'd be like an asset site or, a process improvement project, you're implementing some system, is it going to change in the organization? It's often used to structure the team, not just around documents. It could be around the team members, contact information, a lot of the lists. Some of our clients are saying, how do we better partner with our CROs? How do we get information from our CROs? It's often the one. The other thing is around accessing documents and organizing them in a way that's where content can be approved for field salespeople in terms of what they can say and how they share it. So it's just not around the documents, but ultimately what can be shared. The business process piece can be a really big one as well.
Yep. Yeah. Yep. I got one more. I think it's important because we do quite a bit of it, and that's the app development. And a lot of people probably don't realize it, especially if you don't have SharePoint 2013, is it's become an app development platform where you can create these JavaScript-based applications and deploy it pretty easily across devices. I'll give you an example of one project. We designed and developed this Navigator app, and if you install the app on any SharePoint site, it basically was this companion assistant that sort of followed people around and helped them navigate through all the content. And pretty effective solution. Just keep that in mind. So app development is an option in SharePoint 2013. So is there any other questions?
Looks like we're just about 45 minutes here. Why don't we wrap up the webinar? I appreciate everybody attending. Billy, any more final thoughts there?
No, this was great. Yeah, I think we've gotten through all the questions. So thank you very much for all the questions we got from the attendees.
Okay, everyone, thank you for joining. And if you have any more questions for us, again, you can see my email address up on the screen. And we have a variety of other webinars planned, so we hope to see you there. Thank you.
All right, take care. Bye-bye.